Tread lightly.
Greetings, my lord.
Wait till you see me in action.
Hello.
No one orders me around. This is more like it. Finally. Ah, at last. This is more like it. Speak, fool. Ah, at last. Finally. Ah, at last. Finally. Ah, at last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. For the Lich King. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Now, Frostmourne. This is more like it. Finally. Ah, at last. This is more like it. Ah, at last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. No one orders me around. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Frostmourne hungers. Ah, at last. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally. This is more like it. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally.
First blood.
Brethren's
town is under attack.
Frostmourne hungers.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Speak, fool. Finally. Ah, at last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
At last. Frostmourne hungers. Ah, at last. This is more like it. Ah, at last.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Finally. This is more like it. Finally. Ah, at last. Finally. This is more like it.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Frostmourne hungers. Ah, at last. Finally. Ah, at last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Ah, at last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Ah, at last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Ah, at last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. Tread lightly. This is more like it. Finally. Speak, fool. This is more like it. Finally. This is more like it. Faithless coward. Frostmourne hungers. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last. This is more like it. At last. This is more like it. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. Frostmourne hungers. At last. What is it now? No one orders me. Finally. For the Lich King. You will know endless torture. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. What is it now?
Our
At last.
town is under attack.
Tread lightly. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Finally. This is more like it. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Your pain I'll make sure you suffer. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last. This is more like it. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Speak, fool. Finally.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
This is more like it. Tread lightly. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it.
Our brethren's town is under
At
attack.
last.
Killing spree.
Speak, fool.
Dominating. Double kill.
At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally.
Our
This
brethren's
is
town
more
is
like
under attack.
Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers.
Killing spree.
Glory to the Scourge. Our
Faithless
brethren's
coward.
town is under attack.
This is more like it. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. At last. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. Finally. This is more like it. Your pain shall be lived. At last. At last. Frostborn hungers. At last. What is it now? Finally. At last. Frostborn hungers. Finally. This is more like it. Frostborn hungers. At last. At last. Frostborn hungers.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
At last. Finally. Frostborn hungers.
Killing spree.
At
Our
last.
forces are under attack.
Frostborn hungers. At last. Finally. At last. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. Frostborn.
Mega kill.
No one orders me around. Finally. At last. Finally. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it.
Unstoppable.
Frostborn hungers. At last. Finally.
I'll have it up in no time.
What is it now? Speak, fool. Frostborn hungers. Finally. Frostborn hunger. Finally. At last. Frostborn hungers. Glory to the scourge.
Killing spree. Double kill.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
At last.
Killing spree. Double kill.
attack.
This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
No one orders me around. I wish only to tread lightly. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it. Finally. At last. This is more like it. At last. Finally. At last. Frostmourne hungers.
Our brethren's town is under
Dominating.
Scourge. Finally. At last. This is more like it. At last.
Our
Frostmourne
brethren's town is under attack.
At last. Frostmourne hungers.
Mega kill.
At last.
Our brethren's
Finally.
town is under attack.
Frostmourne hungers.
Take your time. Look around.
No one orders me around. Finally. At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. What is it now? At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it. You will know endless. Now.
Killing spree. Double kill.
At last. This is more like it.
Our
Frostmourne
brethren's town
hungers.
is under attack.
This is more like it. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers.
Our brethren's town is under
Finally.
attack.
Frostmourne hungers.
Our forces are under
Finally.
attack.
This is more like it. Finally. At last. This is more like it. Finally.
Our forces are
At
under attack.
last. Finally. This is more like it.
Killing spree. Double kill.
At last. This is more like it. At last. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Finally. This is more like it.
For the Lich King.
At last. Now, Frostmourne. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally.
Glory to the Scourge.
This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. I'll make sure you suffer. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it.
Mega kill. Unstoppable. Double kill.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Welcome to our village.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Get me something to do!
Greetings, my lord.
Tread lightly. Ah, at last. Finally. Ah, at last. Finally.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Ah, at last. This is more like it. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. For the Lich King.
You will know endless torment.
No one orders me around. Ah, at last. Speak, fool. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally. This is more like it. Now. Frostmourne hungers. Ah, at last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Frostmourne hungers. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally. This is more like it.
Glory to the Scourge.
At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers.
Double kill.
At last. Finally. This is more like it. At last. This is more like it. No one orders me around. What is it now? Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers.
Yes, me lord?
No, not like
Is
that.
someone injured?
Let me do it.
Welcome to our village. Greetings, my lord.
No one orders me around.
What? How may I serve?
Tread lightly. At last. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Thy bidding, master. No one orders me around.
Welcome to our village.
Speak, fool. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. No one orders me. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Visit now. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it.
Faithless coward.
At last. For the Lich King. Finally. This is... At last.
Double kill.
At last. Finally. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it. Finally. Frostmourne hungers.
I'll make sure you suffer.
This is more like it. At last. Frostmourne hungers.
Faithless coward.
At last. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally.
Double kill.
This is more like it. Finally. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last. This is more like it. At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers.
Where shall my blood be spilled?
Speak, fool. Finally.
Glory to the Scourge!
No one orders me around. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Finally. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers.
Killing spree.
At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Frostmourne hungers. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Finally. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last. This is more like it. Finally. This is more like it. Tread lightly. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last. This is more like it. Finally. This is more like it. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. At last.
Double kill. Killing spree. Triple kill.
No one orders me around.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Speak. Frostmourne hungers.
Glory to the Scourge.
Frostmourne hungers.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
At last. At last. Frostmourne hungers.
I'll make sure you suffer.
This is at last. This is more like it. At last.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
This is more like it. At last. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Finally. This is more like it. Frostborn hunger. This is at last. This is more like it. At last. Finally. This is more like it. Frostborn hungers. Glory to the Scourge. Finally. Frostborn hungers. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it.
Dominating.
Our brethren's town is under attack. Our brethren's town is under attack.
Mega kill.
Our brethren's town is under attack. Our brethren's town is under attack.
At last. Frostborn hunger. What is it now? Finally. No one orders me around. At last. Finally. At last. Frostborn hungers. Tread lightly. At last. Finally. Frostborn hungers. Finally. Frostborn hungers. At last. No one orders me around. Frostborn. This is more like it. Speak, fool. Frostborn. This is more like it. Finally. Frostborn. What is it now? Finally. This is finally. This is at last. Your hands. This is more like it. Frostborn.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Killing spree.
At last. Frostborn hungers. Frostborn hungers. Finally. Frostborn hungers.
Our brethren's town
This
is
is
under
more
attack.
like it. At
Our
last.
forces are under attack.
No one orders me around. Finally.
Double kill.
This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers.
Our brethren's tower is under attack.
Finally. This last. For the Lich.
Our brethren's tower is under attack.
Your pain will be legendary. Glory Scourge. Frostmourne.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
At last.
Greetings, my lord.
Tread lightly.
Our brethren's town is under attack.
Finally. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. What is it now? At last.
Dominating.
Finally. At last. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. At last. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. I'll make sure you suffer. This is more like it. At last, Frostmourne hungers. No one orders me around. Frostmourne hungers. Finally. This is more like it. At last. Speak, fool. No one orders me around. Finally. Frostmourne hungers. At last. Speak, fool. Frostmourne hungers. Frostmourne hungers. Your pain shall be legendary. Your pain shall be legendary. Faithless coward. Finally. This is more like it. No one orders me around. Your pain shall be legendary. Frostmourne hungers. At last. This is more like it. Frostmourne hungers. This is more like it. Speak,
Welcome
fool.
to our village.
What is it now? Frostborn hungers. Finally. Ah, at last. Finally. This is more like it. Finally. Ah, at last. This is more like it. Frostborn hungers. Finally. Ah, at last. Speak, fool. Frostborn hungers. Finally. Frostborn hungers. This is more like it.
Faithless coward.
At last. Frostborn. At last. Frostborn hungers. This is more. Finally. Frostborn hungers. This is
Double kill. Double kill.
for the
Triple kill.
This is more like it. Frostborn hunters. At last. This is more like it. Finally. Frostborn hunters. Finally. What is it now?
Greetings, my lord.
Speak, fool. Frostborn hunger. This is more like
Dominating.
hunger.
Own it.
At last. For the Lich King.